head coach of the Stanford Cardinal. He's been the coach of the year in the Pac-12 four times. David Shaw joining us from his home. Even though you've got a campus shot over your shoulder, Coach, I'm assuming that your home is not close to campus where that's the actual picture out your window.
Yeah, of course, because no one can actually afford to live anywhere near Stanford University. So, yeah, I've become really good at this whole Zoom thing and backgrounds, having some fun with those.
How often are you using Zoom with your players?
As for me personally, periodically, my staff a lot. What I decided to do is not have a lot of team meetings. This whole thing has been traumatic to everybody, and so I wanted the position coaches to spend most of the time with the guys. I don't want to use up a lot of their time, but I want it to be very individual, very intimate. That's mainly what we're all missing is those personal connections. So I wanted to meet in as small groups as possible, so those guys still have that sense of community.
I asked this question to Kirk Ferentz at Iowa yesterday. I'll ask it to you. And who's going to decide when you come back to play football? Is it up to the governor? Is it up to the president? Is it up to you? Is it up to the Pac-12 commissioner? Who would make the decision for Stanford to come back and play football?
For me, it's a cascading deal of events to where state and local governments are going to have a big say on which areas can open and when. Our president and provost at Stanford are going to have their process in place, which has been a lot of meetings about how to reintegrate people onto campus, whether it's a closed campus and stay online or partially open and partially closed and bring some student backs with social distancing. So a lot of those things have to happen. And then when it comes to actually playing, Dr. Hainline at the NCAA, every conference has its own medical group consortium, if you will, talking about the process of not just playing a game, but reintegrating a team back together. And the testing is at the forefront, and isolation and all those things that need to have happen as we hopefully continue to push for a vaccine. So there has to be processes in place to get people back together, but at the same time, processes to make sure if someone does contract the virus, they can quickly be found and isolated to keep it from becoming a team-wide situation.
Do you allow yourself to have contingency plans, hypotheticals? And the reason why I say this, the NFL commissioner said to all the teams, no hypotheticals. Don't talk about hypotheticals. We're going to be playing football in the fall, and that's why the schedule is going to go off as scheduled here. But it's about planning.
Yeah, I think the NFL and college football are in similar situations, but not the exact same situations. They've got a collective bargaining agreement. They got all kinds of stuff. They've got team owners, et cetera. We got college kids. So I think for us, we need to talk about all the possibilities, all the eventualities, and not to mention, we're not on the same page all the time as far as all the conferences are concerned, let alone the different levels of Division 1, 2, 3. So we have to talk a lot about contingency plans. What happens if this happens? What happens if this happens? For there to be transparency with our own players, for us, we have transparency for scheduling. What happens if one campus shuts down and the other one's not shut down? And can we still play a football game? So there are a lot of things that we have to talk about so that when the fall does come, we are able to play football and we can deal with all the things that can come up.
Yeah, and we had talked to the SEC commissioner, and I said, can you see where maybe not all schools are going to be playing football in the fall, but the SEC continues to play, let's say 12 schools want to play football. Their states allow them to play football. What if Vanderbilt decides it's not going to play, or Northwestern in the Big Ten, or Baylor in the Big 12? Like, it feels like you might have conferences that are going to play football without all their teams. Can you see that happening?
What I can see happening, because everyone that I've talked to, and I'm on multiple committees, conference committees, NCAA committees, everyone I've talked to has said that everyone wants to play football. It's just whether or not it's going to be possible. So that's what a lot of the commissioners are going to have to deal with. And I mentioned earlier, scheduling is going to be fascinating. It all depends if a lot of states stay closed and we get towards training camp, then we have to adjust the schedule so as many teams as possible can play, and then we have to play each other. So I do believe everyone has the intention of playing. I really hope and pray over the next couple of months or so that we have more available rapid diagnostic testing, which is huge to find out very shortly if someone does have a virus. We can isolate them and keep it from becoming spreading amongst an entire team. So I think that's everyone's intention is to play some form, and then the biggest issue, which has come up from Bob Bowlesby at the Big 12, from many people at NCAA, we have to have those contingency plans to say, let's say something happens during the season and either one team or multiple teams or all of college football is interrupted. And we have to have a contingency plan for that as well.
He's David Shaw, Stanford head football coach, joining us, Dan Patrick Show. Tell me if this is true or not. The first time you saw Christian McCaffrey in high school was not on a football field, it was on a basketball court?
The first time I actually saw him was on campus at Stanford. We were recruiting his older brother, Max, and Ed McCaffrey brought his boys by and met Max, and it was a great conversation with Max. And they brought their younger brother, and I got this steely-eyed stare and this very firm handshake from this young kid. It was one of those deals where I'll never forget. I looked at him, I shook his hand, and I started to look back at Ed, and the handshake was so firm. I looked back at him and kind of like tilted my head, like, "Oh, wow, okay, you're like this now." That's always stuck out to me. I didn't know if he was going to be a good player or not. And then as soon as I saw the film from him, I think first film we saw was a little bit of his sophomore year. I said, "You've got to be kidding me! Like this kid's a sophomore, but he's making people look silly." And then his junior film was off the charts, and then the senior film, of course. So every year the kid has played football. He's been great, and the next year he's been better.
There was no thought, like he was playing running back. If he was coming there, he's playing running back, right?
We said he was playing football because when he played defensive back, he was the best defensive back on the field. He was a punt returner.
Oh, wow.
I still say he's probably the best gunner we've ever had, and I watched him do it in one practice. And I said, "There's nobody in America that can stop this guy as a gunner, but we can't play him at gunner. He's got to have the ball in his hands."
You look at the running back position now, David. I don't know if it affects how you recruit. College is different than the pros, but how we're utilizing running backs they're not as valuable now. You don't want to waste a top 10 pick, it feels like, on running backs. But what do you look for in a running back, and how is it different in college than the pros?
So that's a great question, and I don't think it's that different as far as most of the teams go. I agree. You can't waste a top 10 pick on a pure running back. But if that guy gives you versatility, if that gives you what Christian McCaffrey can give you, that be able to catch the ball out of the backfield, be able to run the ball between the tackles and outside, and be a return man, a guy that can play in a lot of snaps and do a lot of different things for you, that guy is now extremely valuable because now he's your best running back. He's also one of your best receivers. He's a return man. I think what Saquon Barkley gives the Giants, that big playability where it doesn't have to be, it can be anything. You can toss sweep, an inside run, an outside run, anything can score and you can catch the ball in the backfield. So the versatility to me is the biggest change in the last, I don't know how many years now. You're looking for that versatile guy. He's extremely dynamic. But if you've got a group of good running backs, now you've just got a good group of running backs. You still win with those guys. But if you've got a difference maker, then that's worth going to get that guy.
How often did recruits think that you were NC State as opposed to Stanford? Like before you guys, didn't you put the tree into the logo just because they thought you were NC State or Syracuse, or is that true?
Absolutely. I'm not even going to deny it. When we got here with Coach Harbaugh in 2007, I'll never forget it. I was the East Coast guy. I came out of 9 years in the NFL. I had never really been on a recruiting trip, so I got the logo on and going to places, and I walk in and a guy says, "Hey, NC State's here," and I look like, "No, this is Stanford." And I'm in New Jersey, and they're like, "Hey, is that Syracuse?" I said, "No, it's." So I started wearing the full Stanford across my chest because the logo wasn't doing it. So thankful to Nike, thankful to Bob Bowlesby at the time to really differentiate our logo so that we could actually be recognized. But as we all know, the biggest reason why we started getting recognized, we started winning.
Of course. Well, I have two kids who went to USC. We were in South Carolina visiting.
My condolences.
Yeah, I know. They couldn't get into Stanford, David. They couldn't get in there. I would have sent them there. But they were in South Carolina with a Hootie and the Blowfish concert, and they had their SC stuff on, and people said, "Oh, you went to South Carolina. And the looks on their face, and my kids were like, South Carolina? No, we went to the USC. So they faced it as well.
Absolutely.
Good
absolutely.
stuff. Hey, it's great to talk to you. Hopefully we get some football there. And thanks for joining us. We appreciate it.
Hey, always great to see you, Dan.
That's David Shaw. He's the head coach at Stanford.